You asked for it, you got it. Welcome back to another oversimplified reaction video. And today we're going to take a look at the final mini wars video that I have yet to review, which is the Emu War. If you have not seen any of my other reactions to oversimplified videos, which really, reaction's a difficult term to use because I really try to add something new and add some context with my background and history. So I don't know a ton about the Great Emu War of the 1930s, but I'll try to offer what I can, fill in some information, give a little bit more background, kind of de-simplify this a little bit. But there's links in the description to my other oversimplified reactions. Check those out if you would. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Look around. There's a nice mix of reaction content as well as original content, all focused around the idea of us learning more about history together. So I hope you enjoy. Let's dive into the Great Emu War from Oversimplified.
This is Australia. For the man who imagines being strangled by a tarantula while a kangaroo breaks his kneecaps and thinks, yes please. For the man who pictures himself being eaten by a snake in the burning outback while eating a Vegemite sandwich and thinks, yes please. And that man was Governor Arthur Phillip, who landed in Eastern Australia in 1788, presumably saw a dingo being eaten by a crocodile, being eaten by a death adder, being eaten by a koala, being eaten by Mel Gibson, and thought to himself, yes.
Being eaten by Mel Gibson. So yeah, Australia, for my Australian friends, and I know we have a lot of you out there that follow this channel, Australia is viewed by much of the rest of us as this kind of wild place even today where there are giant spiders that will eat you. My wife wants no part of ever going to Australia because she's seen pictures of, I guess you guys have a spider season? No thank you. But yeah, Australia starts out for the English as a penal colony, which is basically, if you look through the records at this point in history in the 1800s, they had a very interesting way of dealing with criminals. Often they would do one of two things. If they didn't execute you for a number of crimes, they would put you on what was called a prison hulk, which was basically, if you imagine a big warship where they take all the stuff off the top, like the cannons and the sails and all that stuff, and you're basically just left with the hull. And they park it in a river somewhere near a major city, and then they fill it with prisoners. That's a prison hulk. I had uncles who ended up in prison hulks at different times. The other thing they would do is send you to penal colonies. And Australia was one for a long time. Georgia in the United States was set up as a penal colony at one point. And of course, what we're going to get into today is a time when a major nation went to war with flightless birds and lost. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself.
Good. Now I know what you're thinking. But oversimplified, the British didn't discover Australia, the Vikings did. And you'd be wrong. I'm not sure why you'd think that. But hey, if you love Vikings so much, then why don't you check out today's sponsor,
okay.
Vikings War of Clans.
Wondered where it was going with that.
PC strategy and RPG games of the 90s we all loved, like Age of Empires and Civilization. If you, like me, want to relive those memories again with a new experience, then this mobile game is for you. Vikings lets you choose your own playstyle, and what makes its world so addictive is that more than 20 million online players are constantly changing the way it evolves by never-ending fighting over resources, forging new alliances, and competing in live events. Support my channel by downloading Vikings for free, only from my links in the description box below, and get the special bonus of 200 gold coins and a protective shield. Buy! Man, this is great. The market will continue to grow forever. But what if it doesn't? Oh crap, I never thought of that. Sell!
1929.
And the stock market crashed, which led to economic downturn, which meant banks wouldn't lend anyone any money, which led to more economic downturn, which meant everyone stopped buying stuff, which led to more economic downturn.
So, yeah, it's a spiral of stuff that goes out of control that leads to the Great Depression. Interestingly, before the Great Depression was the Great Depression, there was another Great Depression. It happened in the 1870s. There was a panic, very similar in a lot of ways to this one. It wasn't quite as worldwide as the Great Depression was in the 1930s, but they called it the Great Depression, that one in the 1870s, until this one came along.
And hey, what if all the crops in the Great Plains were destroyed in a drought and then a big dust storm engulfed the area? That's right, more economic downturn. And in an effort to combat the crisis, America began imposing tariffs on foreign imports, which made the economic downturn go global, and the earth got really depressed. But one nation that was hit harder than most by the whole affair, Australia. The problem for Australia was that it relied heavily on its export industries, and in the current economic climate, no one was buying. To make things worse, Australia had introduced its own currency and pegged it onto the gold standard via the British pound, but then the UK started messing with its own peg on the gold standard, and if this is starting to sound confusing, then let me oversimplify it for you. Hey UK, looks like my car is broken down. Want to give me a tow? No problem, friend, I got you.
That's about it. That's about right.
More economic downturn. The point I'm trying to make is things weren't good, and in particular, it was Australia's farmers that were suffering most. After the First World War, Australia had given returning veterans land for farming, but with the current economic crisis, the farmers...
There's a parallel here between the United States after the American Revolution and Australia after World War I. What does Australia have a lot of? Land. Now, a lot of the center of the country is not really good for land, like farming and things like that, but there's still a lot of it there and not a lot of people to occupy it. And so what they have in abundance to be able to reward people with is land. The same thing happened after the American Revolution. When the Revolution was won by the United States, everything west of the Appalachian Mountains is now fair game, whereas the British had made it off limits and set it aside for the Native Americans. So now the U.S. government is giving these huge land grants to men who served in the army during the war because they've got lots of land.
Just weren't making enough money, and many left to go find work in the cities. But for those who remained, things were about to get even worse.
The emus.
Before we get into that, it's time for some cultural exchange. My national bird is the bald eagle. It's a strong patriotic symbol of America and a deeply valued and protected species. My national bird is the peafowl. It's a beautiful creature whose vivid colors represent India, so we list it as a protected species. My national bird is the emu, and it's a pest. Also bloody delicious. Emus, 6 feet tall, 90 to 120 pounds, and able to run at speeds up to 40 miles per hour, usually return to the coast after their breeding season. But suddenly they found Western Australia full of lush, wet farmland.
So not only 6 feet tall and can run 40 miles an hour, which is crazy fast. I mean, this is a flightless bird that is as tall as a human that can run faster than humans can. And they also apparently are bulletproof. But we'll get to that.
Oh my, look at all this delicious wheat that just so happens to be growing here in large quantities. Hey guys, get a load of this. You know, my, look at all this delicious wheat. Just so happens to be growing here in large quantities. Oh yeah, that's really good.
But a major problem.
Grains every day. Hey, who left this big hole in the fence? Guys, get a load of this. Oh wow. That's really good. Oh yeah, that's what I am. Great. What a lovely morning for some farming. What? Those damned emus? They have it in for me. They're bullies. They're nothing but bullies. Calm down, Bruce. They're just animals. It's not personal. Hey, Farmer Bruce, where did you find that hat? The toilet? Yes. 20,000 emus cost the already struggling farmers millions more pounds in lost crops and damages.
Only 20,000 of these things, but they're huge. Imagine if you looked out the door at your farm and you saw a bunch of 6-foot birds running around eating your stuff. I mean, where do you even begin to deal with that?
The situation couldn't continue like this. Something had to be done. So in 1932, the farmers turned to the government for help. You'd think they'd go to the Minister of Agriculture, but these farmers said no. This is a job for the military.
The army.
So they went to George Pierce, the Minister of Defense. That's right, Australia was to go to war with the emus. But not everyone was happy with the idea. This is barbaric. We can't go slaughtering thousands of our own national bird. Oh, come on, guys. The machine guns will make it quick and painless. Machine guns? You're using machine guns? This is animal cruelty. Look, I know it's unusual, but it's not like we're poachers turning the birds into feather hats. Think of the benefits. It'll be good target practice for our boys. The government can show it took action. Plus, I can get myself a nice new feather hat. Did I say feather hat? I meant I want to... gather chat. With you. About getting you all some nice new feather hats. Did I say feather hats? I meant I want to wage terror at these emus and turn them all into feather hats. Damn it! Of course, Pierce first made the farmers sign an agreement saying that they would pay for the whole thing and that Pierce wouldn't take any of the blame if the operation, that was clearly very stupid, turned out to indeed be stupid.
So, typical politician, right? I want to get all the credit if it goes right, but none of the blame if it goes wrong.
And the operation went ahead. Major GPW Meredith and his men were sent with 2 Lewis machine guns to hunt down and take out the evil emu population in Western Australia. Target spotted. Well, was it an emu? No, sir. It's an emo. Damn it, Jones. Learn your vowels. I'm sorry. Okay, it looks like the humans are coming for us. But check this out. I've come up with an amazing plan. See if you can follow me here, okay? When they approach, we run away. Sir? You're a genius. Pierce sent the camera crew along with the machine gunners to capture some good old propaganda for the government. And the first battle took place in November at Campion. The men spotted a mob of emus from a distance, so they set up their guns and opened fire. The emus split up into smaller groups and ran in every direction. The men were only able to kill what they called a number of birds, but the vast majority got away. Cut!
I don't know why you think only 2 is going to be enough, because they're going to scatter. You're dealing with 20,000 of these things. Why can't you send in like at least a battalion or something? I don't know.
Surprisingly, many of the emus were able to take multiple bullets, but still run at full speed to safety,
bulletproof,
causing Meredith to compare them to tanks, saying if we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. Okay, we need to get closer. No, you idiots, not to me, to the emus. Oh, sorry. No. I like it. So next, they tried sneaking up on a large number of emus near a local dam and firing at short range. Maybe the men were just unlucky, but my professional opinion says the emus were magic, because both guns jammed after just 12 emus were killed, and once again, the rest got away.
That's crazy. Again, you're using 2 guns! Maybe they thought that sending more would be overkill and it would be bad optics. I don't know.
Cut! The men were feeling a little humiliated after losing to a pack of discount ostriches, so they decided to move further south, where the emus were said to be tamer. And this time, they had a new strategy. Okay, Jones, here's the plan. You mount the machine gun in the back, I'll chase the emus, you shoot.
Mechanized warfare.
Got it.
That went well.
I'm gonna shove that camera up your... The operation was a fiasco.
So, speaking of mechanized warfare, I can't speak to other nations, but I know in the history of the United States military, the first person to employ the idea of mechanized warfare, in other words, or mobile warfare, using a vehicle to carry out an attack, was actually George Patton. George Patton is a lieutenant serving on the staff of General Pershing in an incursion by the U.S. military into northern Mexico to try and get Pancho Villa. Pancho Villa had raided into the United States, killed some American citizens, and so the U.S. military was sent into Mexico to deal with him. And Patton actually gets a bunch of guys onto a car, and they go driving into this ranch, guns blazing. And it's the first time that an attack like that was carried out by the U.S. military.
And the press had a field day. In Parliament, Pierce was lambasted, and an opposition party member suggested that medals should be handed out to the emus, who had won every round so far. Pierce...
That is brilliant politics right there. I mean, and I've always loved how I'm guessing Australia's parliament is similar to how they do it in the UK. I've always loved that style of democracy better than the republic that we have in the United States, where everything's like there's decorum and all that stuff in the House. I love how they do it there. And for this guy to stand up and call his opposition out like that by saying we should give medals to the emus for winning these battles, it's fantastic.
Feeling quite humiliated, called the operation off, but 4 days later the farmers approached again and said, "Hey man, the emus are still eating all our crops. Can you send the army back out here?" And Pierce was like, "Yeah, okay." So the operation was back on for round 2. And this time Meredith and his men had learned the emus' guerrilla tactics and were much more successful, with reports suggesting the men were cutting down 300 emus every week. I hope you boys are getting great footage of this. What on earth are you filming? Despite the success, the media had lost interest in the whole thing. But with
what? Mel Gibson eating a koala? Come on. Oh, boy.
Emus killed, Pierce finally ended the operation and returned to Parliament declaring victory for the humans. So there were 20...
All right, and so the mission accomplished thing is a reference to in the early days of the war in Iraq in 2003, 2004, that time period. There was this, what turned out to be a really bad visual stunt where you have George W. Bush, who's president of the United States at the time, and had been a fighter pilot in his younger days, coming in, landing on an aircraft carrier in a fighter plane. And there's this big banner that says mission accomplished. And of course, they'll argue that it was actually the mission of that aircraft carrier that was accomplished. They weren't claiming that the war was won, because we all know in hindsight it certainly was not at that point. But that's a reference to it.
3,000 emus out there destroying crops, and you've killed 1,000. Meaning there's still 19,000 emus out there. Yep. And in addition, you've burned through 10,000 rounds of ammunition. Meaning you wasted 10 rounds per confirmed kill. That's right. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and call this one for the emus. At least I got a feather hat.
Now, honestly, I will say this. 10 rounds per confirmed kill when you're dealing with birds that can run 40 miles an hour, that can take multiple bullets before they go down. And when you look at the stats on how many rounds are expended per kill in war, it's honestly not that bad. In fact, let's take a look at that real quick. So I looked up a couple of different resources. Apparently, some estimates for World War II are that 45,000 rounds were expended for every person killed in World War II. In Vietnam, for the U.S., it was about 50,000 rounds for every person killed. So 10 per? It's honestly not that bad.
What? So in the end, the emus won the Great Emu War of 1932. And the emus continued to wreak havoc on the farmers for years to come. The government introduced a bounty system, which saw some success. But for a moment, let's take some time to remember the brave men who said goodbye to their families and risked their lives to take on the great, evil emu population in Western Australia.
Look at those Lewis guns. Those are huge. And the guy's got it mounted on somebody's shoulder. I would think, because machine guns very historically get super hot when they're fired for a lengthy period of time. A lot of them, they end up developing cooling systems to help keep them firing longer. But you couldn't have been able to do that on somebody's shoulder for very long.
But even more importantly, let's think of the friends they made, the bond they created, and the memories they shared.
I think the Emu War went for like 6 weeks total. Oh my God. What is happening right now? It's where the heart lies, with stories on...
Hey, guys? I solved the emu crisis. Really? How? I just made some better fences.
Oh my gosh, that was awesome. All right, so don't forget, check out the original content. I put a link in the description to the original video. Make sure you subscribe to them if you haven't already. And check out some of my other reactions to Oversimplified in the description below. And please consider becoming a patron. Shout out to all of our fantastic patrons, nearly 300 of you now. We've got a goal of getting to 500 by the end of the year. Hopefully you can be a part of that. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, you've been asking for this one for a while. Today, we're going to dive into Oversimplified's Football War. And if you have not seen my other reactions to Oversimplified videos, I've put links to all of my Oversimplified reactions in the description below, as well as the link to the original content, so you can check that out. Although I'm guessing most of you have already seen it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Take a look around, see what you like, and if you like what you see, consider subscribing. I would greatly appreciate it. We have a nice mix of not only my reaction, which really are more than reactions. I really attempt to try and give more information and add some value to what I'm reacting to. It's not just me saying wow and holy cow the whole time. But as well as that, I have some original content that I would invite you to check out, from my historic site videos to vlogs just talking about various things, to my series on forgotten history. So with all of that said, let's dive into Oversimplified Football War.
quick. You have 2 seconds to name these two countries.
Honduras, El Salvador.
You're wrong, unless you got it right. Then good job. They are, of course, Honduras,
I've been to Honduras.
and El Salvador. One thing these two countries have in common is being fanatic about football. Or if you're a freedom-loving patriot, soccer. But do they love
Or if you're a freedom-loving patriot, soccer. Most of the world calls it football. We Americans, I don't know why we call American football football, because they use their hands way more than they use their feet. It makes way more sense to call soccer football than it does to call what we call football. I've got my West Brom jersey on today. I'm a huge West Bromwich Albion fan. Love the Rangers in Scotland and the Columbus Crew here in the United States. Yeah, it's not just El Salvador and Honduras that are fanatics about football. I mean, it's pretty much the whole world, right? I can remember I was a senior in high school back during the 1994 World Cup when a guy got murdered from one of the World Cup teams. It was 94. Colombia played against the United States, the men's teams. And there was an own goal scored by one of the Colombian players. I think his name was Escobar, Andres Escobar. And he was murdered a couple of days later. It was pretty horrifying, but that shows you how seriously people take this game.
Love it so much they would go to war over it? You bet they would, and that is no bueno.
No good. I think that's what bueno means.
If you look at these two countries, you might notice one major difference, and that is that this one is a lot bigger than this one. However, this one had a larger population than this one, made up mostly of farmers, and there wasn't enough land for them to live and work on. So they started moving from El Salvador to Honduras in search of land, and by the 1960s, a huge number of illegal immigrants had crossed over the border from El Salvador.
Isn't that interesting? Illegal immigration is not something, here in the United States we talk constantly about illegal immigration coming up from Mexico, but there's a lot of that going on. You know, a lot of the people coming in from Mexico into the United States aren't coming from Mexico, they're coming through Mexico. Illegal immigration happens all over the place, it's not just there.
Meanwhile, in Honduras, it's 1963, and this guy has just staged a military coup to prevent the rise of communism, and is now the military leader of the country. He
Defenestration, he threw him out a window. We talked about that recently.
Began harassing the peasants' unions and other left-wing groups, but he's a little insecure about the legitimacy of his leadership. So he holds an election and wins, but then the opposing party says, hey man, that election was clearly corrupt and fraudulent, and also you've been bribed by the rich American banana companies who are taking all of our bananas tax-free, and now our economy is in ruins. And everyone started to get mad at him. Now if you ever find yourself the barely legitimate military leader of a corrupt Central American country, and you start getting into hot water, here's a bit of advice that has been tried and tested throughout the centuries.
Start a war.
Blame something else.
Yeah, so we've talked about this in many other videos before. It's sometimes called Wag the Dog. There was a movie called Wag the Dog. You know, a lot of times people get accused of doing this when there's a scandal or when they want to take the focus of their country off of something. They create something else to put their focus on. And a lot of times this really isn't happening intentionally, but sometimes it is. Back during the Monica Lewinsky scandal with Bill Clinton in the 1990s, he launched some airstrikes on a Middle Eastern country over some terrorist threats and stuff like that. And he was blamed for doing that then, that he was trying to distract people from his scandal at home. Anytime you can get people to either focus on something else or unite behind you against something else, that's what you're going to do.
So he blamed the Salvadoran immigrants for stealing all the land and all the jobs and ruining Honduras. The immigrants found themselves under attack by the hostile locals. Egged on by the rich American banana companies who wanted all the bananas to themselves, the Honduran government began evicting Salvadoran immigrants who had been living on the land for generations and started sending them back to El Salvador. The Salvadoran elite were furious and protested, citing moral reasons, but in reality, they were just getting a little too crowded. So tensions were about as high as they could be, but then...
Random Ronaldo photo there.
It's the 1970s.
By the way, can we just stop and talk? My son's a huge Manchester United fan. I know a lot of people are around the world. How epic was that first game for Cristiano Ronaldo back at Manchester United, scoring 2 goals? Now, neither one of them. I mean, the second goal was pretty cool. He megged the guy, went right between his legs. But the first goal was just kind of, I could have scored that one, but still, it was pretty epic.
World Cup qualifiers, and both countries finished top of their qualifying tables, so it was now time for them to play against each other in a series of matches. The first match took place in Honduras. The night before the game, Hondurans gathered outside the Salvadoran team's hotel, making noise and taunting them. The next day, Honduras defeated the exhausted Salvadorans with a late 90th minute goal. After the match, a young Salvadoran fan, unable to bear her country's defeat, shot herself. Disturbingly, the Salvadoran government glorified the incident and made her into a national hero. And at the next game, fans brought pictures of her to the stadium. Emotions were running high.
Which is actually something that happened with the guy I told you about earlier, the Colombian player who was murdered. He was ambushed in a parking lot by 3 guys who shot him 6 times, and the one guy kept saying "goal, goal, goal" every time he fired the shots, responding to the number of times that the word "goal" was said on the broadcast. But people brought his picture to the next game that was played. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty heavy stuff, and when you've already got tensions between these countries, and now you've got this match, it's a recipe for disaster.
As the next match took place in El Salvador, and this time the tables were turned. The Hondurans had to endure a sleepless night in their hotel, and the next day, before the match started, instead of the Honduran flag, the Salvadorans raised a dirty rag. So great job at reducing tensions. El Salvador won decisively over the exhausted Hondurans. While spectators battled in the stands, Team Honduras fled home in a bulletproof bus with rocks being thrown at them, and the Honduran coach reportedly told his players that they were lucky they lost. In response to the defeat, Hondurans began terrorizing the Salvadoran settlers even more, in some cases reportedly throwing them off their land and burning down their homes, and the immigrants began fleeing back to El Salvador. The final game in Mexico would decide who went to the World Cup. It was close, but El Salvador came out victorious, knocking Honduras out of the tournament. The atmosphere was riotous, literally, and back in Honduras, attacks on the Salvadoran immigrants further increased. This was too much for El Salvador to bear. With its people under attack and an unmanageable refugee crisis on its hands, El Salvador severed all diplomatic ties with Honduras and declared war.
Wow.
The football war is also known as the 100 Hours War, because that's how long it lasted, making it one of the shortest wars in history. El Salvador started by carrying out air raids on strategic locations within Honduras, including Toncontin International Airport, which prevented the Honduran Air Force from getting into the sky. Then, with their superior army, they began an invasion along 2 major roads, complete with light tanks and infantry. Their advance was rapid, and they were quickly approaching the Honduran capital. Then the Organization of American States met in a bit of a panic and unanimously agreed that war between El Salvador and Honduras was a bad thing and probably shouldn't continue. So they went to El Salvador and said, "Can you please stop invading?" And El Salvador declared, "Not until they stop being jerks," and so the war went on.
Well, especially because they're winning, right? You know, I mean, you've already invaded. Why stop, especially if you're on the steps of their capital and you're about to possibly win the war?
The Honduran Air Force finally got into the sky, and with aid from neighboring Nicaragua, they successfully carried out air raids on Salvadoran air bases and oil facilities, crippling the Salvadoran supply line and stopping their advance dead. Caught in a bit of a stalemate, the situation was no longer advantageous to El Salvador, so when the Organization of American States once again asked them to stop and agreed to ensure the safety of the Salvadoran immigrants, El Salvador relented, and a ceasefire was organized on the 18th of July. Then the OAS said, "Can you now please withdraw your troops from Honduras? No, please, no, please, no, please, no. Do it or we'll sanction you." You know what? Just for you? We'll do it. So El Salvador pulled its troops out of Honduras on the 2nd of August, and with casualties in the thousands...
I mean, think about it. This is a 4-day war. Those are pretty substantial casualties for a 4-day war between 2 relatively small nations. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a lot.
The war was over. The economies of both nations were damaged by the war, and El Salvador didn't have the capability to take care of all the returning immigrants, a crisis that eventually helped cause a civil war. The war left behind land and border disputes, some of which are still a cause of tension to this day. El Salvador went on to play in the World Cup, but lost every match they played and didn't make it past the group stage.
Didn't even score a goal.
So in the end, nobody achieved anything, and there were no winners. Except for this guy.
So let's talk about this, because the World Cup qualifying for North and Central America is actually going on right now. Well, World Cup qualifying is going on for everybody, but specifically those 2 nations, let's see if they're involved and when they play each other. So they had the group stages already for the CONCACAF World Cup qualifying. El Salvador won their group, won 3 games out of 4, scored 13 goals, only allowed 1. They had a 1-1 tie in that one. Or was it 0-0? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, they tied 1-1 with Montserrat. And then, let's see. El Salvador and Honduras are both in it. So you see it right there. So the way this works is now that they're down to the final 8, the final stage, the third round they call it, the top 3 finishers automatically go to the World Cup. The 4th goes to an interconfederation playoffs where they'll have to play someone from another confederation, probably South America, I would guess. But right now, you've got Mexico, Canada, and the United States, the 3 largest countries in the confederation that are in the lead. And the U.S. actually just played Honduras and got their first win after 2 draws. They were like tied 1-1 with 20 minutes to go and then scored 3 goals in the last 20 minutes. I watched that game. It was pretty exciting. But so, Honduras and El Salvador very much in this still. When did they play each other? It looks like they play each other on January 30th of 2022. So that may very well have either a spot in the playoffs or a spot in the World Cup on the line when they play each other, because that'll be the next to last match, it looks like, out of them. So big deal there. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. So let me know your thoughts about all of that. Check out some of my other oversimplified reactions. Check out my original content. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and we will see you again soon. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, everybody, to another oversimplified reaction video. If you have not seen my other reactions to Oversimplified's videos, I have listed them all in the description below, so you can check them out. Also, the link to the original video we're going to be looking at today. It's the War of the Bucket. Now, I know very little about the War of the Bucket. My understanding is that it wasn't really over a bucket, but rather this is a war between a couple of neighboring areas in what is today Italy, and that the bucket was taken as a trophy. I believe there was really only one battle during the War of the Bucket, but that's about it. That's really all I know. So I'm here to learn today. I'm excited to dive into this. If there are interesting things that I want to learn a little more about, we may stop, throw on the glasses, and do a little looking some things up. But other than that, I'm excited to dive in. Let me know your thoughts. Use the comment section below. Let's check this one out.
You. New merch available now, including a supremely uncool t-shirt and a glorious new character pin. Link in the description down below. Alright folks, gather round. I've got some good news and some bad news. Did you say good news and glad news? No, I said good news and bad news. Very bad news. Word on the street is there's going to be a horrible plague coming in from Central Asia in the next couple decades that'll wipe out half of Europe. What's the good news? Do you have a cure? Please say you have a cure. No. Even better. The good news is, we've got a new bucket for this city well.
Yay! Wait, you know what that makes me think of? If you've ever seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, there's this kind of ongoing thing where they're doing like their animated parts, and there's a part where they say, and there was much rejoicing, yay! And there's like a couple flags that wave and stuff like that. So it makes me think of.
To understand the War of the Bucket, we first need to talk about this guy. He's the man with the plan, the host with the most. He's holy, lowly, he eats ravioli, with the white cassock, matching pellegrina, and the most tasteful of fringed fascias. Come on, y'all know who I'm talking about. It's the Pope, the head of the largest religious organization in the world. But what?
So, an interesting background to the Pope. Those of you who are familiar, probably more familiar with Roman history than I am. The title Supreme Pontiff, which is one of his titles, Supreme Pontiff of the Catholic Church, is actually something that predates Christianity. It was actually a title that existed in Rome as well. I don't know a lot of the background, but I know they kind of borrowed that from there.
What if I told you he wasn't always the big bad boy powerhouse he's often thought as today? That's right. Throughout history, the papacy often found itself forced to wrestle against adversity and opposition to retain its authority. The earliest popes, for example, suffered under the brutal persecution of the Roman Empire, and many ended up martyred, such as Pope Clement I, who was ostensibly thrown into the sea with an anchor around his neck. On the bright side, however, he's now the patron saint of fishermen. After persecution finally ended, the Pope still found himself being heavily controlled by secular kings and nobility. For over 2 centuries, the Byzantine emperor basically decided who could become Pope. Then came a real low point, during what has been called the Dark Age, a period where noblewomen controlled the Pope through how should I put this? Feminine charm. It was around here that one infamous Pope, John the 12th, took office. This bad boy would hold, how should I put this? Naughty no-clothes parties in the Lateran Palace. And apparently, this would even happen. Come on, Zeus. Give me a 6. Did I say Zeus? I meant Thor.
Yeah, we have to remember that, while today the Pope is the head of the Catholic Church, and he was then too, he was very much a secular leader as well. And you look at the Borgias, for example, one of the Borgias becomes Pope, and he's got children. And a lot of these popes, even though we're supposed to be unmarried, would have mistresses, would have would wear armor and lead troops into battle. And, the Pope was not, you can't, just like with a lot of things in history, you can't apply today's understanding of something to what it was 700 or 800 years ago. The Pope was very different than he is today.
Ra, the Egyptian sun god?
No.
Dang it, who is it we worship? Perhaps you should read this, Your Holiness. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth? Wow, this is wild. Pope John XII eventually died exactly how he lived, caught in the act by an irate husband who picked the Pope up and chucked him out the window.
Wait. All right, let's look a little more about that one up. John the 12th. All right, so first of all, Pope John the 12th is somewhere between the ages of 17 and 24 when he becomes Pope. So there's your first problem right there. His name was Octavianus of Spoleto. And it says his pontificate became infamous for the alleged depravity and worldliness with which he conducted it. Two conflicting stories of his birth, both are kind of scandalous. His his mother may have been an unnamed mistress of Alberic who gave birth to him in 930, or it could have been Alberic's wife, also his stepsister. Game of Thrones has nothing on the Romans. There's a long list of grievances against John the 12th, and it includes ordaining a 10-year-old as a bishop, part of a larger claim he had been selling off titles within the church, and ordaining a deacon in a horse stable. He was accused of fornicating with his father's mistress, not the same one who may have been his mother, presumably, his own niece, and several widows, and, quote, made the sacred palace into a whorehouse. The same account claims he blinded his confessor and then killed him, and castrated a subdeacon before also killing him. Good night. He had a powerful ally in the King of Germany, who was the future Holy Roman Emperor. He also made an enemy of him. He's only 27 or 34 when he died, killed by a woman's husband, in which he was enjoying a adulterous sexual encounter. Okay, dang. And there's a lot more to his story than that, but there you go, John the 12th.
Make here is that often the Pope was a very weak and corruptible figure and was regularly used and controlled by secular leaders as a tool to increase their own power and influence. And there was certainly an element of that in the year 800, when the Pope and the Kingdom of the Franks were good BFFs, and King of the Franks, Charlemagne, was like, hey man, being King of the Franks is nice and all, but I want more legitimacy, and also to become the continuation of the Roman Empire. So what say in return for my protection, you crown me Emperor so everyone will respect me more? Sure thing, pal. We'll hold the ceremony tomorrow. Charlemagne, King of the Franks, I hereby crown you Emperor of the West. Oh my goodness. I was not expecting this at all. What a surprise. I simply cannot accept. Oh. Okay, then. I guess I'll just put this back over here. Give me that crown. Charlemagne's...
And, this begins a time when the Pope actually offers legitimacy to heads of state in Europe. And actually, this is where eventually the Pope will get a lot of his power and authority, is because he becomes the one everybody looks to give them the okay to go to war, to give them the okay to overthrow someone, to give them the okay to get a divorce and marry someone else, Henry VIII and others. So this is the start of that process. I mean, it's been happening some here and there, but this is where the Pope goes from being someone who relies on the protection of others to being the one who grants the authority to others.
Crowning as emperor was certainly an historic moment, but it also created a bit of an interesting problem. It set the precedent that from here on out, only the Pope could crown an emperor.
Yep.
But the Pope was also very much under the influence and control of Charlemagne. So who really held the power here? The Pope or the Emperor? I'm sure that this conflict won't cause anyone to die. Bishop of Freising, we want to thank you once again for visiting our wonderful city. It's been an honor. The pleasure is all mine, and what a wonderful tour it's been. I've seen the city walls, I've seen the towers, nothing could
What about the bucket?
Oh, couldn't it? Because we've saved the best for last. Ta-da!
Yay.
Yes, that's very interesting. Isn't it the greatest thing you've ever seen? Well, I mean, it is just a bucket.
Just a bucket.
Get him out of here! Over time,
What?
Charlemagne's position as emperor and the kingdom of the Franks gradually evolved into the Holy Roman Empire.
Yep.
And by now, the Pope and the emperor weren't such good friends anymore, since neither could agree on who was the boss of who. To make matters worse, the emperor had taken to investing his own bishops and abbots. What does that mean? Well, allow me to explain. The problem for the Holy Roman Emperor was his empire wasn't really an empire, so much as a nightmarish federation made up of hundreds of counties, duchies, bishoprics, and more.
And so I think might have been Voltaire, I could be wrong about who said that, but who said the Holy Roman Empire wasn't holy, it wasn't Roman, and it wasn't an empire. It wasn't any of the things that it was labeled as.
The princes in charge of these local regions often didn't give the emperor their loyalty. The German nobility spent a lot of their time rebelling against the emperor, and the emperor spent a lot of his time trying to put down those rebellions. Can we get rid of them? Who? All the nobility. Get rid of them and pick new ones who are loyal to me. You can't just remove noble families from their territory. Please?
Kinda can.
Okay, how about this? Some of those territories are ruled by bishops and abbots, and as Holy Roman Emperor, considered by many to be the deputy of Jesus Christ himself, perhaps you can choose who gets to become bishop and abbot. Yay! Now,
And this is something that a lot of secular leaders tried to wrestle for that kind of power. It happened in England, where the kings of England tried to have the authority over who would become Archbishop of Canterbury, for example, things like that. So and a lot of times the popes, in order to keep powerful secular leaders supporting them, which thereby then gave them their authority that they would, that circular thing he's talking about, division of power, they would often say, okay, you know what, you can name whoever you want way out there in Britain, way over there in Germany if you want to, and I will support your decision. Just make sure you keep supporting me.
now it's time to turn out the lights and go to sleep. Okay, I love you. Okay, good night. Say it back. And so it was. The emperor invested his own family and loyal followers into powerful church positions,
Which was no different than what the Pope would often do, as we've already discussed.
and thereby was able to increase his own power and authority. Not only that, but the emperor and other nobility were also engaging in something called simony. That's when someone would come along and say, hey, I want to become a bishop and get all the personal riches that come with the position. Perhaps we could come to some kind of arrangement. That's right. Church positions were actually being sold to the highest bidder. And let me tell you, they probably didn't come cheap. It's gonna cost you a lot more than this. I don't think so. I've got a promo code.
Oh boy.
And speaking of promo codes, do you like free money? I know I do. I really like it. And that's why I use Honey. Honey
It's
is
actually
a
really
free
good. I
browser
use it too.
extension that automatically finds the best promo codes whenever you shop online. For free. This means you always get
Gonna
the
let this
best
play, but
deals
I'm gonna play on
without
my
even
phone for a little
trying
bit.
on over 20,000 sites like Amazon, eBay, ASOS, and more. For example, here I am buying 7 pizzas after a long day of animating. It's currently costing me $130. Oh, hello, honey. You have
Can I just take a moment and say how disappointed I am that there's a Domino's in my town, but it's too far away and they don't deliver to me? I hate that because Domino's is like my second favorite pizza in this area. We have this place called Wedgwood Pizza, which is phenomenal. Having it for dinner tonight because my wife's going scrapbooking, which means I'm in charge of making those decisions, and I'll order pizza for all of us.
a voucher for me, you say? All I have to do is click, you say? Nice. I saved $31.78, and all I did was click. There is absolutely no reason not to use honey for everything you buy online. It's free and literally takes 2 clicks to install.
True.
Get honey for free at joinhoney.com/oversimplified. That's
Wait,
joinhoney.com/oversimplified. And as always, by using my links, you'll be supporting my channel. So thank you. Now where were we? Oh yeah. Investing bishops and abbots, selling church positions, authority, and power. Wait a minute. This is depravity. The purpose of the church isn't for him to increase his own authority and power.
Me.
It's for me to increase my own authority and power. What about Jesus, Your Holiness? What? I thought the purpose of the church was to spread the good message of Jesus Christ. How drunk are you?
Oh, man.
Very. Alright, the results for the election of Chief Magistrate are in. Giovanni Kablami, 1%. Spaghetti Jeff, 2%. And...
Spaghetti Jeff. All right. It's probably a little bit offensive to Italian people, but we'll let that one go.
The bucket, 1 trillion%. Around the year 1050, a series of reformist popes came along, and they said enough was enough. They wanted to stop the emperor from abusing the church and investing his own church officials. How are you going to stop me so long as I have control over who becomes pope? Remember the circular power division? If you try to stop me, I'll just depose you and pick someone else. Oh no, I've contracted tuberculosis. And just like that, the emperor was dead. His 6-year-old son, Henry IV, took over. And as we all know, child emperors equal opportunity. The church had an opening to take back control of the papacy. Hey man, I hope you don't mind, but we're changing the rules so that only the church cardinals can elect the pope, and you no longer have any say in the matter. You know, if that's cool with you. I peed my pants. Okay, great talk. Then, with the position of the pope a little more secure, he held a big meeting where he drew up a big list of all the reforms and new powers he was giving himself. And it included some pretty gnarly stuff. Okay, first, I have the power to depose emperors. Everyone cool with that? Yeah?
You gotta think about, this is pretty gutsy. I mean, and these are the kinds of things that are only possible in the power vacuum that exists when children accede to the throne in a given region. Same kinds of things happen all throughout history when children come to the throne. He's going from not only taking away from the power, or from the emperor, the power to have a say in who the pope is, now he's giving himself the power to say who the emperor is. This is a major shift in the balance of power.
Let's see. Only I can depose or reinstate bishops. Yeah? Alright. No one can judge me. All princes shall only kiss my feet. Only my name shall be spoken in the churches. My name is the only name in the world. Okay, I think you're done. These were all some pretty radical powers the Pope was giving himself, and with these reforms, the Pope was basically telling the Emperor, you no longer have the right to choose your own bishops and abbots. Only I can do that. When the Emperor, now a full-grown man, heard the news, he was furious. What? This is madness! Who does this guy think he is? I'm the Emperor, for goodness sake. He can't tell me what to do. I'll invest my own bishops and abbots if I want to, and this rapscallion can go right to heck! I peed my pants again! The whole conflict escalated when Henry IV went to the Pope and said, hey, guess what, sucker? You're deposed. Oh. Wait a minute. I'm the Pope. You can't depose me.
I depose you.
Deposed.
Yep.
Oh. Wait a minute. I'm the Emperor. You can't depose me. You're deposed. Oh. Wait a minute.
Oh boy.
Eventually, the German princes took advantage of the situation and they all turned against Henry. Henry was forced to apologize to the Pope and the whole thing ended there. Except it didn't. The whole conflict, known today as the Investiture Controversy, would continue on for centuries as popes and emperors engaged in a power struggle over the emperor choosing his own church officials. The overall result of this conflict is very intricate and full of complexities, but in general, the Pope was able to increase his authority. Great news, Your Holiness. Your influence is on the rise throughout civilized Europe, except for this one city in northern Italy. Really? What's going on there?
The bucket.
As for the Emperor, he found his realm thrown into...
I don't think it was quite like that, but I love how he's making this bucket to be uber important, way more than it really was, because it's the War of the Bucket.
further chaos and civil war, as the local princes continued to increase their own power and independence. This was most notably the case in northern Italy. Separated from the rest of the Holy Roman Empire by the Alps, the emperor's influence and control over Italy had often been questionable.
And, you know, I mean, thinking of this in modern terms, Italy, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, you know, these are primarily Germanic cultures that are north of the Alps. It's primarily Italian culture south of the Alps. There's a natural divide that goes beyond just the geographical divide there. So let's look a little bit more into what's going on at this time. So while they kind of implied that this is something that goes on for hundreds of years, and to an extent it does, because there is that balance of that struggle of power, but primarily most of it was settled within about a 50-year stretch here in the Investiture Controversy, 1076 to 1122. You know, that struggle between the papacy and the Catholic Church and the Salian dynasty of German monarchs who ruled the Holy Roman Empire. Now, later on in the Holy Roman Empire, it's not always going to be Germans who rule the Holy Roman Empire. You know, Charles V, for example, is a Habsburg Spanish emperor. He's the uncle, or he's the nephew of Catherine of Aragon, who's married to Henry VIII. So, you know, they get away from that strictly German kind of thing. But you can see here Henry IV, who was the Holy Roman Empire or emperor from 1084 to 1105 and king of the Germans during much of that same period. And says, although the conflict persisted beyond their deaths and had political ramifications for centuries to come, that's kind of the primary time. And it really goes all the way back to Otto I, 962 to 973, who's a couple generations after, Charlemagne. But by the 1100s, for the most part, this thing's pretty well resolved.
In the current chaos, these Italian city-states began operating almost entirely independently. Their practical independence was further solidified when Emperor Frederick Barbarossa came down in 1176 to try to reassert his control. The cities formed an alliance, and with the Pope's support, they kicked the emperor right back to Germany. "Hooray," said the Italian city-states. "We did it! We're the best of friends." And then they immediately began attacking each other. Why? Well, this whole Pope versus Emperor thing, in Italy at least, had infiltrated society to its very core.
Well, and remember too that this is a common thing in history, right? You can unite warring peoples behind a common enemy. Once you defeat that enemy, then you start focus on each other again. Look at, even in modern times, look at the United States. When 9/11 happened, Democrats and Republicans were incredibly united. George W. Bush had like a 90% approval rating. That's unheard of. That's ridiculously unheard of for any leader in this country to get that kind of support. But, you know, when everybody's focused on an exterior threat or opponent or enemy, then suddenly all the stuff that we were upset about kind of gets set aside. But then once we deal with that for a while, now we're going to focus on each other again.
Across Italy, families and cities were torn between two opposing sides. On one side, the Guelphs, who supported the Pope's cause. On the other, the Ghibellines, who supported the emperor. These two sides struggled for control as Guelph cities battled against Ghibelline ones. As usual, personal interest played a pretty big role, as pro-Pope Guelph cities tended to be rich mercantile ones who didn't like the emperor's taxes. Emperors supporting Ghibellines, on the other hand, were often agricultural, where the expanding papal states were a larger threat. These cities would sometimes even switch sides depending who was in charge and their ever-changing personal interests. In some cities, brutal fighting broke out in the streets as opposing families fought for control. At times,
Okay, we got sword, spanking the guy in the butt. It's and this guy's about to be thrown off a roof up here. I don't know what's going on back here. That guy's a plague doctor, and he's just kind of chilling.
Conflict became so tribal that the differences between the two sides were just downright silly. My love, I can't bear it. We must be together. But how can we? My Ghibelline family wears feathers on the left side of their caps, and your Guelph family wears them on the right.
It's like Romeo and Juliet.
My Ghibelline family cuts fruit straight down, and your Guelph family cuts fruit crosswise. These are arbitrary differences. We shouldn't let them tear us apart. We can be together no matter what our families think. Wonderful news! Let's make a toast to our love. I'll drink from my Ghibelline smooth goblet, and I shall drink from my Guelph chaste goblet. Get out of my sight, you dirty pope-loving wench. Two city-states in particular that got caught in a long-standing rivalry was the emperor supporting Modena and the pope supporting, bucket-loving, Bologna. These two cities had bad blood between them, as they had already fought against each other on a number of occasions. In 1249, the two sides took part in the Battle of Fasolta, after which the victorious Bolognese launched a live donkey into Modena to humiliate them. For decades after that, the two...
So again, reminding me a little bit of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where they're like, fetch la vache, go get the cow, and they launch a cow at the guys. That legit was something that happened, apparently. We're going to have to look that one up, too, because I got to know if that's real. Okay, so right here. The tensions continued to rise between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. They rose to a boiling point, and many battles were fought between many of the city-states. In 1249, there was a standoff between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. The Battle of Fasolta. In the battle, the Bolognese, along with the Guelph allies, attacked the Modena city-state. This battle is another one of the escalated actions between the Guelphs and the Ghibellines brought on by the rivalry between the Holy Roman Emperor and the Pope. As expected, we were successful in our attack and won for ourselves and the Pope. To further humiliate Modena, we launched a donkey into their city to show how exactly how ridiculous their beliefs are. I don't know exactly how that shows how ridiculous somebody's beliefs are. It kind of shows me that you're a little ridiculous that you launched a donkey into the city. But hey, okay, whatever.
Humiliate them. For decades after that, the two sides would occasionally take little day trips into each other's territory and mess things about a bit. In the fateful year of 1325, the Bolognese went on one such trip and laid waste to some farmlands. The ruler of Modena, Passerino de Bonacolsi, was having none of it. The Bolognese had two major forts protecting their city in the southwest, so Passerino, in retaliation, decided to take an army down and lay siege to one of them. Hey, you dirty Bolognese jerks! You think you can raid our farmlands? Come out here and face me like a man! Hey man, what's up? I've just come out to let you know that there's no need to siege us because... Whoa, hey man, chill out. I'm trying to tell you... Whoa, stop doing that! I'm trying to tell you I'm actually secretly sympathetic to the Imperial cause and I want to willingly hand the fort over to you. Oh, cool. Okay. Dude, what was that for? For betraying your people. And this is for joining mine. Mwah. The Bolognese were pretty unhappy to lose one of their main defensive forts, but to make matters worse, then this happened. Hey, wait a minute. Where's the bucket? Oh no, it's gone. Those Modenese must have taken it. We'll make them pay. This is unacceptable. They may take our lives. They may take our fort, but they will never take our bucket. Oh wait, here it is. I found it, guys. It's right here. Phew. Could you imagine if we started a war over that? That would have been really stupid, and there'd probably be a billion videos about it on YouTube one day. Thank goodness it never actually happened. That's right. The famous story you may know about the War of the Bucket, that the war started because Modena stole Bologna's bucket, doesn't actually seem to be quite right. I was surprised to find that the bucket was likely not actually stolen at the start of the war. And at this point...
No, it actually, I think, like I said at the beginning, I think it was taken as a trophy after the fight actually happened.
I want to thank and give a big shout out to fellow history YouTuber M. Laser. He's the one guy I found who actually translated a fantastic original Italian source, and then kindly allowed me to use his work in my own research. He does really well researched and in-depth videos, and definitely deserves way more subscribers, so please head on over and check him out.
Cool.
The real reason Bologna seems to have declared war on Modena is simply that they both hated each other, supported opposing factions, the Pope had called on Guelph cities to attack Passerino, and Bologna wanted its fort back. And they were gonna get it back. Bologna had a large force, much larger than what Modena could muster up, so they felt pretty confident. They sent half their force to lay siege and take back the fort, and the other half took defensive positions to prevent the Modenese from crossing the river. The smaller Modenese force were struggling to find a place to cross, so one night they were like, "Hey guys, look out, we're attacking way up here in the north, better move your troops." Oh, would you look at that? That was easy. And just like that, the Modenese were across the river. The Bolognese were probably expecting the Modenese to come and break their siege, but instead, the Modenese went for the second fort at Zappolino. Bologna couldn't afford to lose both of its defensive forts, so the entire Bolognese force moved to take defensive positions at Zappolino. When the Modenese arrived, it was already late in the day, and there were about 2 hours of sunlight left. In most medieval battles, at this point, both sides would set up a camp, rest for the night, and prepare for battle the next day. But the outnumbered Modenese decided the only way to win was to deal a quick, decisive blow while the Bolognese were still unorganized and unprepared. And that's exactly what they did. They charged at the Bolognese line, and the two sides engaged in fierce combat. Then the sneaky Modenese pulled what must be the most predictable, yet somehow consistently surprising move in medieval warfare. They sent the cavalry around the side and hit them from behind. Bing bang bong, the Bolognese went on the run, with casualties in the thousands.
He's right, too. I mean, look at how often that's how people won battles. That's typically why if you had cavalry, you put them on your flanks, so that didn't happen to you. But it seems to have happened over and over and over again, successfully somehow.
Modena had won, and the Modenese cavalry chased the Bolognese cavalry all the way back to the city. After Modena's victory, they went on a tour of the Bolognese countryside, burning some stuff down along the way. When they reached the city itself, instead of laying siege, they set up a camp and basically held a massive party for 3 days. The defeated Bolognese could only sit back and watch. As the Modenese force began packing up and getting ready to leave, they noticed something. Oh my god.
The bucket!
Hey, check this out. No way! Are you kidding me? They're still using traditional wells! Hey you dumb Bolognese, ever heard of an artesian well? You can't even get water out of the ground without using a stupid bucket. It's not a stupid bucket, it's a wonderful bucket. Yeah, whatever, bucket boy. We're taking this with us.
All right, let's talk about that for a second. Artesian wells. Let's talk about how those work. So basically the thing about artesian wells is rather than digging down and having the water be down at the level at which the underground water is and you have to lift it up, you're digging somewhere where you've got water up high and water up low, and wherever you are in the middle, where the equilibrium is between those levels, if you dig, the positive pressure will push the water up. So, say right here you've got that level, so halfway down, right about here, if you dig a well there, the water's going to come right up to that level where the equilibrium exists between this lake and this bedrock. So same kind of thing here. You've got a stream down here. You've got an area up here. Here's the groundwater table. You can get the artesian well to come up to that level. So instead of having to drop a bucket down, you've got the water right there at that level. So it's a lot more complicated than that, obviously, but that gives you a little bit of an idea behind what they're talking about there.
So Modena stole Bologna's bucket and put it up on display in their cathedral, eventually moving it to the city hall, where it remains on display to this day. The two cities came to a peace settlement a few months later. Bologna would have to pay heavy war reparations, and in exchange, Modena would return all conquered territories. Modena kept the bucket. Despite being one of the bloodiest battles in medieval Italian history, it didn't really change anything, except now Modena had Bologna's bucket. As for the larger power struggle between the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor, that would continue on for some time and played a part in many major events of medieval history, such as the Crusades, the Protestant Reformation, eventually leading to the general separation of church and state we see in Europe today. So there you have it. We learnt about the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor, the Investiture Controversy, and finally, the War of the Bucket. It's been a long day, and it's time to turn out the lights and go to sleep. Okay, I love you. Okay, good night. Say it back!
So one of the things I always love about Oversimplified, and I've talked about this before, is that he does a great job of showing how everything's connected. No historic event exists in a vacuum. It happens because of the things that came before it, and the things that come afterwards happen because of it. So he gave a lot of background into the hundreds of years before that, how those events all led up to a seemingly unrelated event, but they're all connected. And you can do the same thing all throughout history. You take out one event and everything that comes after completely changes. So kudos to him for doing that. Make sure you check out his original content if you haven't already. I'm guessing you probably have. Check out all my other Oversimplified reactions in the descriptions below. And we will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.